Number 47 does not have any line references. It does have a very specific question, so you could use that to skim. But remember, when we don't have a line reference, our first move should be to go to the next question and see if they are connected as an evidence pair, and that is exactly what we have here. So when we have evidence pairs, it's very important that we follow the QLC method, right? We want to have a process here. There's a lot of information to take in. And in this case, it's especially difficult because this question is really hard. So if I look at the Q here, the question, let's just try to understand what they're asking for. The passage suggests that if Settele had planted wheat or corn on the two agricultural strips in Hartman's experiment, the percentage of the surface of each strip covered with weeds would likely have been. Okay, so there's these strips, okay, these strips in Hartman's experiment. We're planting things on them, but only hypothetically. So I guess maybe they're not planted with things. I don't really know. But we need to care about the weeds. Basically, I'm confused. But that's okay. I don't need to understand the big picture of this question right away. I see the little pictures that are building it. So I'm okay with just being like, I got to talk about the strips, I got to talk about weeds, and I got to talk about what's going to happen when these things grow, I guess. So, fine. We'll figure it out. Trust yourself. Now we go to the line references, and we try to figure out, do any of these have anything to do with anything? Well, line reference A is a classic move the SAT makes. So let's look at 56 to 60. So that's literally that first sentence of the passage, of the paragraph. Hartman tested his idea by plowing two agricultural strips near Alterhaus in Germany. The farmer Karl Seidel cultivated one strip, repeated threefold, at around midday, and the other strip at night. Okay, well, this is what I would call a what choice. It tells me what I already know. I know that these strips exist because of the question. And so this is just stating something that was told to me in the question. But that's not what the question wants. It wants the why. Why are these strips important? Why do I care about them? Why would they have weeds or not have weeds if Seidel planted them with corn and wheat? So this is a lot of matching ideas, but it doesn't actually answer the question. This is a common reason you can cross out evidence line references. They provide the what, but not the why. This question wants the why. So let's see, looking for that. 60 to 62. Okay. B. No crops were planted in these pilot experiments to avoid possible competition with the emerging weeds. Well, okay. They definitely talk about crops in the question, right? They talk about corn or wheat. Okay, so that's related somehow. And we get maybe a why. Why weren't crops planted? To avoid competition with the weeds. So the weeds are growing. That's also part of this. So this feels like it's checking a lot of boxes. It's talking about weeds. It's talking about the crops. It's talking about competition. Let's write that because that seems to be a new piece of information. I don't know why it's relevant yet, but I get that it's relevant. Okay, so this is a why. This is answering something. We'll figure out specifically what it's answering in a second. Let's look at 62. The results were dramatic. Okay, who cares? That's not anything great. It's not a why. It's got to tell me why are they dramatic, if anything. So let's look at D. More than 80% of the surface of the field plowed in daylight was covered by weeds, whereas only about 2% of the field plowed at night was covered by weeds. So, okay, there's a day-night difference. Let's write that down. That might be related to, because it has to do with the weeds and the fields, and it seems like a why. It seems like a result. So, cool. We got two choices, B and D. But now let's go to the questions choices, the C here, and see if we can figure out why they might match. Why do they answer the question? I'm still trying to understand this question better. It's a little confusing. It's better, but still confusing. Okay, so if he had planted corn, then the percentage of the surface of each strip covered with weeds would likely have been lower than the percentage that Hartman found, higher than the percentage that Hartman had predicted, nearly impossible for Hartman to determine. Well, I don't know why that would be impossible, right? It seems like he was able to decide 80% and 2% of the field was covered with weeds. Seems like it's possible. I don't get why it would be impossible. So that seems wrong. Comparable to Hartman's original projection. Well, I don't have anything about his original projection here. Now, it could be in a previous paragraph, so we might want to read back and find it, but I'd love to have some evidence of it here that what he found was somehow expected or unexpected. Plus, remember, they're talking about the weeds, but the question is talking about corn and wheat, other crops being planted here. So I don't know why he would have projected that there would be corn or wheat if that's not what the experiment is about. So you see, they're adding a hypothetical in this question. And we're supposed to reason what would happen based on this experiment or what they say. But why would Hartman have a projection about that? It's hypothetical. It's not something he actually did. He wasn't thinking about this. So this just seems wrong because it doesn't match with what's being described, an experiment about weeds. So it's got to be either lower or higher, so let's figure it out. And honestly, I'm focused on choice B here, line reference B, because line reference B did talk about other crops. So why didn't we plant crops? We didn't plant crops because we wanted to avoid competition with the weeds. Okay, so here's where I need my brain to do a little bit of the forcing here to make sure that I understand what's going on. It's not written. I have to infer what's going to happen. So if there's competition, okay, with the weeds, well, what would happen then? If there's competition, then it wouldn't just be weeds. So we would have weeds plus crops. Right, so right now it's only weeds. So when he gets this 80% and this 2%, it's just weeds. That's all we saw. But if those weeds had competition, then we'd have weeds plus other things. And presumably, if it was weeds and crops in these fields, there would be fewer weeds because the crops would be competing and probably stealing some of the resources, the nutrients, whatever. So the answer here is A, because if they had put corn in these fields, the new fields would have corn plus weeds. Whereas right now they're just weeds. And if you throw that corn in, it's going to mean that you probably have fewer weeds. It doesn't say that. We're doing a lot with this word competition. We're taking that word and we're kind of just squeezing all the meaning out of it. And that's very rare. We don't want to do that often on the SAT because usually the lines are supposed to tell us what we need, just straight up. But this question didn't have that, and it was set up as a hypothetical, so it was set up in a way where they were basically telling us, this is not in the passage, you're going to need to think about it and figure out what would have happened in another version of this experiment. And so I thought about it. I'm still using the words from the line reference B, but it does involve more work than I'm used to, and that's scary, and it doesn't happen often, so when it does happen, it's okay, right? 1 or 2 times per test is all we're talking here. So we do have answers here, then A for 47, B for 48. It's difficult, and if you were running out of time, this would not be the question to waste time on. There's better stuff to come, especially because we end this passage with a graph. So if you're running out of time when you hit the last passage, this kind of pair with a hypothetical and a confusing question, skip it. Bubble B for both things. Pick your favorite letter and just bubble it and move on. And if you have time, come back, but get the easier points first. This is a hard thing. It's not worth your time. There's easier points to come.